I don't know what it is she sees out there, so. Maybe she just wants to do her sunny. She likes to lay in the sun. But anyway, getting back to what I was saying. Team fighters began the mission and probably ran into the next big stumbling block in Sonic the Hedgehog 237 and 238. We were gearing up for the quote-unquote Secret Freedom Fighters arc, a quote-unquote Secret Freedom arc in Sonic Universe. And here they were supposed to meet a key figure, Hershey St. John, aka Hershey the Cat. Hershey was originally intended to be under deep cover as a Dark Egg Legionnaire. She had faked her death and infiltrated Razor Claw's chapter of the Dark Egg Legion, but hadn't had an opportunity to report her well-being to her husband Jeffrey. My plan was that she would. Okay, let me get a drink of coffee here. This is a long thing. Okay, continuing. My plan was that she would have met with team fighters, learned of Jeffrey's allegiance to Axis Nagas, and promptly headed for home. I'll get into greater detail about that plot line later on. Excuse me. The next hiccup in plans ended up being something of a blessing in disguise. The editor felt the three teams, Freedom, Fighter, and Secret, needed a bigger push. He also wanted a Tripliat cover by Patrick Spanzinen, or Spaz. So the timetable was pushed back 3 months to write Heroes. Heroes was originally slated to run Sonic the Hedgehog 239 to 241. The idea here was that Part 1 would focus on Team Fighters, Part 2 would focus on Team Freedom. The respective missions would have gone oddly well, with unexplained events falling in their favor. Part 3 would be the Secret Freedom Fighter story, showing how they caused all the good fortunes in Parts 1 and 2. Excuse me. Sorry about that, I was checking on my dog. She was trying to get into a rose bush or something, or one of the geraniums, as my mom calls them. Getting back on course here, sorry. Sorry for all the interruptions, I really am. Getting back on course. And I quote, "I don't know what happened to the covers, but what happened to the story arc was the 2012 Summer Olympic Games. Somehow or another, a cross-promotional deal was struck where an issue of Sonic the Hedgehog would be distributed as a prize for a McDonald's contest. How does that work? Let's break it down. Archie Comics produces Sonic the Hedgehog, a Sega license. Sega produced Mario and Sonic at the London 2012 Summer Olympics video game. The Olympics were at the time promoted in part by McDonald's. And so there came a very pressing need for an Olympics-themed story whose length, content, and release date were up to the whims of many people above my head, and the editors. Without Heroes to act as a buffer, there's no telling what would have happened to the original plans. So Heroes was cut down to 2 issues, with the Secret Freedom Fighters plots crammed in so it could tie into the Sonic Universe arc. Sonic the Hedgehog 241 became something of a buffer, but thankfully held one of the stories I needed to tell. Sonic the Hedgehog 241 story, Unraveling, was originally plotted to be a series of backup stories. Each of Nagas' scenes, the concert, confronting King Max, confronting Jules, were all meant to be individual 5-page stories. It came together rather nicely as an A plot. It came together rather nicely as an A plot, though. The only major change from my original plans was the ending. Originally, I had simply planned for Naugus to simply trick Jeffrey. Given his weakened state and desperate situation, Naugus would have played to the hero's sympathies. The editor thought this was too weak of an ending, so we changed it to Jeffrey becoming possessed. This still worked within the rules set by the story, and would have still worked for my long-term plans. So it was all good. The other half of Sonic the Hedgehog 241 brings us to the tenacious weed, the Krazood. The Krazood was first introduced in Sonic the Hedgehog number 1 as a one-off gag. It was a mechanical weed that grew uncontrollably but was weak to water. It was hinted at in passing once or twice afterwards, but nothing came of it. When it came time to write a self-contained story for Free Comic Book Day 2010, I had some fun and resurrected the mechanical plant as the Krazood Hybrid Hydra. If it proved popular, I'd find a way to bring it back. If not, it would have stayed destroyed. That was the plan anyway. When plotting out the Olympics tie-in, there was a question of if we would or could include a tie-in story to the main plot line. That way, the millions of people who picked up Sonic the Hedgehog 242 through McDonald's would have been drawn to pick up the next issue. We needed a done-in-one adventure. Something for team fighters to overcome on their way to the next big story arc, endangered species. Why not the Krazood? Of course. It has shown itself to be resilient, why not the Krazood? Of course. It had shown itself to be resilient and was gag villain anyway, so a brief scuffle with it would work fine. But the Olympics tie-in turned out to be a full issue, and the Krazood subplot was written and couldn't go to waste. So the whole thing was transplanted, into Sonic the Hedgehog 241, so that Sonic would still have a presence in his own book. With that, I thought we were done with the Krazood for a while. Instead, it sprouted one last time an endangered species. That's a whole nother kettle of echidnas, so we'll save that for later. The quote-unquote road to 250 was pretty bumpy by this point, but the road washed out completely by Sonic the Hedgehog 247. A legal settlement meant the characters and plot points I had been building off of were no longer accessible, completely undercutting all of the build-up up to this point. Fortunately, the unprecedented Sonic the Hedgehog and Mega Man crossover fell into our laps with perfect timing. Capcom approached Archie with the idea to do a Sonic Mega Man crossover, and Sega was immediately keen on the idea. I now had 4 to 5 months to figure out a new direction for the book while I plotted the crossover. But at the same time, I had to make Sonic and Mega Man work together. How? Sonic's lore was already dense and now a snarled mess, and Mega Man hadn't gotten far enough to introduce most of its iconic characters. I needed an in-universe way to make everything mesh. That's when Genesis waved from its spot on the bookshelf and whispered, "Genesis wave." The end result was one of the most fun and singly most successful periods of the book. Worlds Collide fell dead center in the middle of At All Cost, a story that was supposed to be a turning point in the saga. Our heroes had fallen to the lowest. They had fought to regain control, and now they begin to rise again. We had reached the moment where I was finally going to put our heroes in the upswing to counter everything we'd seen so far. Except now I couldn't. So how were things going to turn themselves around? What was I going to do for the 250th milestone, had we not had the crossover? In the next part, I'll get into how our heroes would rescue Sally, restore Antron, put the band back together, and triumph over even death itself. Wow. That's a lot to take in, isn't it? And again, I apologize for the interruptions in these two parts. But yeah, that's a lot to take in, isn't it? I mean, you can kind of sense where Ian wanted to go. You kind of sense and you kind of see where he wanted to go with the entire story the entire time. And yeah, my dog did want a son. Go figure. But you kind of see, like I said, where Ian wanted to go the entire time with the story arc. You kind of get an idea of what some of the original plans were going to be and what happened. And yes, like many of you predicted, the Olympics tie-in was, Sega related. Basically, it was Sega that came down on it. Now, what I get from this, and I've talked about this before, but not in this detail, what I get from this is Ian Flynn, in a sense, is kind of thankful for the fact that the crossover Worlds Collide came when it did. Because with all the legal matters going on behind the scenes, how else was he supposed to pull this off? How else was he supposed to kind of retool things, reboot them, or soft reboot them, or soft retcon them, if you will, without some kind of, way of doing it, some kind of convenience that would be right there to do it. And Worlds Collide apparently provided that convenience. But what I'm intrigued in is what he had planned originally for 250. So we'll just have to wait and see. I will try to provide a link so you guys could read it yourself and give your take on it. But let me know what you guys think down below. Again, I'm sorry for the interruptions, but let me know what you guys think down below. Comment if you like, and I am out.